If it's Monday, the most important issues, the most important battlegrounds, and the most important takeaways from our new NBC News poll, with just 43 days to go. Plus, federal prosecutors release new evidence in the second assassination attempt of former President Trump, including a chilling letter allegedly written by the suspect saying, quote, "This was an assassination attempt, but I failed you." And Israel launches an extensive, deadly bombing campaign targeting Hezbollah across southern Lebanon, warning civilians living there to evacuate fast as the cross-border conflict continues to escalate. Hi there and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington with just over 6 weeks to go until Election Day. Vice President Harris and former President Trump hitting the trail, campaigning in key battlegrounds this week. As our brand new NBC News poll shows Harris building momentum nationally, even as Donald Trump holds an edge on key issues and as Democrats try to goad him into another debate before Election Day. Our new NBC News poll shows the vice president leading the former president 49 to 44 among registered voters. That lead, though, still within the margin of error. But it does mark the first time the Democratic candidate has led in our poll in more than a year. Harris's favorability has surged since she got into the race in a way that no politician has seen since George W. Bush in the wake of 9/11. It comes as Harris is agreeing to another debate, but Trump is refusing.
Join me on the debate stage. Let's have another debate. There's more to talk about, and the voters of America deserve to hear the conversations that I think we should be having on substance, on issues, on policies. What's your plan? What's my plan? And we should have another one before Election Day.
The problem with another debate is that it's just too late. Voting has already started. She's had her chance to do it with Fox. Now she wants to do a debate right before the election with CNN because she's losing badly. She's done one debate. I've done two. It's too late to do another. I'd love to in many ways, but it's too late. The voting is cast.
Now, as we said, both candidates are going to be hitting the trail in key battlegrounds this week, looking to shore up support in states that could make or break their respective paths to victory. For Trump, that means visits to Georgia and North Carolina and Rust Belt states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Harris is also focusing on Pennsylvania before turning her attention out west to Arizona and Nevada. As the candidates hit the most important battlegrounds, we are getting a clearer picture into the issues that could decide the race. According to our new poll, the top issue for voters remains the cost of living, following by threats to democracy, the situation at the border, the economy, and abortion. Now, voters say Vice President Harris would do a better job of protecting immigrant rights and handling the issue of abortion, and that she has the necessary mental and physical health to be president. But the former president leads on securing the border, as well as the handling of the economy and inflation. Joining me now is our NBC News team. Steve Kornacki is at the big board to break down our latest poll. Dasha Burns is in Pennsylvania, where the former president is campaigning today. And senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has the latest on the Harris campaign. And Shaquille Brewster talking to voters in battleground Wisconsin. So, Steve, let's start with you. This, of course, our first NBC News poll since Harris became the Democratic nominee. Give us your biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Obviously, you mentioned the headline, that 5-point advantage for Harris over Trump, but put this in some context. The previous polls we had, going back a year, when it was Biden versus Trump in our polling, look at what the results were. Very consistently, Trump led, Trump led, Trump led, Trump led, and there was a tie 1 year ago in September 2023. Now, 2 months after Biden exits, as you say, our first poll with Harris as the Democratic candidate, and Harris leads. First time you see a Democratic lead here. First time you see that Democratic number this high. This is 3 points better. Harris is 49 than Biden's best over the past year, 46. So it just illustrates how significantly things shifted when Harris replaced Biden as the Democratic candidate. And this is an interesting finding from the poll, too. It's interesting. Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president in what remains an unpopular administration, but asking folks which candidate better represents change by a 47-38 margin. In our poll, they're saying Harris and not Trump, the former president.
So, Steve, what about the picture behind the numbers? What does that tell us?
Yeah, so take a look here. The gender gap, I think, one of the biggest stories here in this Harris lead in our poll, because look at this. Among men, Trump has a sizable lead. He's beating Harris by 12 points among men. Among women, Harris has a much more sizable advantage. Look at this. It's 21 points, 58 to 37 in Harris's favor among women. So you could see how that nets out in her favor, giving her that lead nationally. But also just take this in some perspective here. That would be a gender gap, 21 and 12, of 33 points. Now, we talked in 2020, in 2016, about seeing historically high gender gaps in those presidential elections. This would obliterate those gender gaps. This has been a staple. The gender gap has been since 1980 of American politics. But if we see anything like a 33-point gender gap in November, that's absolutely off the charts, even by modern standards. And the other key finding here demographically, I think, break this down by race, it's among black voters, 85-7 Harris over Trump. Now, historically, this is what you'd call sort of a normal finding. Democrats have typically won the black vote by margins that look like this in presidential elections. Why this is significant is it did not look like this when Joe Biden was the Democratic candidate. Joe Biden was lagging. He was often in like the 60s among black voters in polling. There are still some polls out there that have Trump doing better than this with black voters, but I think you also saw a lot of polls that were Trump versus Biden, where Trump was in the mid-high teens among black voters, which it's a low number overall, but historically that would be very high for Republicans. So Democrats were very worried about the black vote and underperforming historically with Biden as their candidate. This poll, at least, that's not happening here.
A remarkably different race since the Democrats changed the top of the ticket. Steve Kornacki, thank you for that. So let's go now to Dasha, who is in Pennsylvania, as we mentioned. Dasha, despite trailing in the national head-to-head, voters still favor Trump on some key issues that they care about: immigration, the economy. Are we hearing him address any of those issues today?
Well, Ryan, these are the issues that his campaign, his allies really want him to focus on, to not get distracted, not get baited by the Harris campaign as he has in the past. So earlier today, he was at an event where he did focus on the economy. It was focused on farmers, talking about agriculture, talking about energy. Senate candidate Dave McCormick was there, who's running against Democrat Bob Casey, and the two of them really honing in on listening to the stories, the lived experience of those farmers, people who are in charge of our food production here in the state of Pennsylvania. So this was an economy-focused, farmer-focused message on this panel today. The question is, what are we going to hear at the rally tonight?
And, of course, he's going to head to the South, Georgia, and North Carolina next. We all know what's going on in North Carolina there. The gubernatorial pick mired in a scandal. This is someone that Trump has endorsed. The Harris campaign sees this as an opportunity in these eastern seaboard states. How concerned is the Trump campaign about Mark Robinson's role on the ticket?
Well, look, Harris had already narrowed the margins in North Carolina. It's a state that the former president won in 2016 and in 2020, but by a narrower margin. And now it's a really competitive race there. So really any number of things could tip the scales here. And there is concern among the former president's allies that Robinson could drag down the Trump-Vance ticket. It's why you've been hearing in our reporting that allies are trying to convince him to rescind his endorsement of Robinson. But we just have not seen that yet. And it doesn't sound like he's planning to do so, at least at this point.
And Donald Trump also appearing to reject the idea of another invitation to debate. Kamala Harris has said that she would debate that second debate in late October. Is this Trump just trying to, set the stage for more negotiations on this, or is this a done deal? We're all done seeing presidential debates.
Well, look, right after that first debate, you saw him go into the spin room, which was a surprise to everyone. And you heard him say, I don't think we need another one after this. And now he's really doubling down on that over the last few days since Harris made that announcement that she's accepting the debate with CNN on the 23rd. He has said time and time again that it's simply too late, he believes, to have another debate. But Ryan, for context, he did have debates in October in both 2016 and 2020. It was October 19th and 16, October 22nd, not so far from the 23rd, in 2020. And there's a long history dating back to 1960 of debates in the second or third week of October. So this would not be unusual, but it seems he's sticking to that line. But as we know, with former President Trump, he could at some point change his mind. Doesn't look like that right now, though, Ryan.
Yeah, nothing's ever a done deal completely, right? All right, let's move to Kelly at the White House. Kelly, Vice President Harris, she's going to spend her time in some Sun Belt states, Arizona and Nevada, over the weekend. What's her strategy for winning over voters there?
Well, one of the things we're seeing is that the campaign wants to demonstrate that not only is the blue wall, which is often associated with Democratic success in the upper Midwest, important, but they believe there is room in the Sun Belt to expand their support. And they'll be looking at some targeted approaches. In some places, as in Arizona, as example, there is outreach to the LDS community, the Mormon Church, to find those voters and to try to make an appeal. Also in Nevada, of course, union workers are very important, and there's been a lot of push in the hospitality industry, especially with how much Las Vegas is a magnet for international visitors as well as people from all over the U.S. So that's part of it. But the campaign is also clear to say they want to demonstrate that she will compete and work for votes in all of those critical battlegrounds, whether it's the Sun Belt, the blue wall states of the upper Midwest, and also key states like you were just discussing, North Carolina and also, of course, Georgia. So the battleground is clear, and how they're spending time is an important measure of where they think they can win. And the Harris campaign also says they don't believe that Donald Trump is showing that he is going to all of those places with the same degree of emphasis. That's another line they would like to show for contrast to voters.
Yeah, and Kelly, she's also very busy unveiling new policy proposals. We're expecting a new economic proposal on Wednesday. What do we know about those plans?
Well, interestingly, we don't know a lot at this point, and we've been talking to the campaign, awaiting details about what she will roll out, and they're not giving the specifics yet. We expect that that will happen in Pennsylvania, the important Commonwealth battleground, on Wednesday, and part of what they talk about is showing the contrast to Donald Trump, and we've already heard her talking about ways in which his views about tariffs, the Harris campaign believes, translates to attacks on middle Americans and middle-class Americans because of the higher rate of costs that can result from tariffs. So they will look to fight that argument. We know polling suggests that Donald Trump does well on the economy, and this is an area where being a part of the Biden-Harris administration may be a drag on some of her support because of all that has passed in these last 3.5, almost 4 years with inflation and concerns about costs of everyday goods and so forth. Inflation is down. Prices, to some degree, in certain sectors are coming down. And she will try to make the argument that she has ideas for how to incentivize and how to support first-time home buyers and small businesses. But the specifics, we're still waiting to see.
And, of course, we shouldn't forget about President Biden. He has a busy week. He's about to deplane in New York. He's going to deliver a speech at the UN General Assembly. He's also going to be on The View on Wednesday. It'll be his first sit-down interview since the Democratic convention. How is the president preparing for all of this?
Well, certainly the UN General Assembly will be his last time to speak to this world body at a critical moment when there is a world on fire in certain parts. The Middle East is certainly in a position of great concern for the administration about an expanding war, ongoing concern for Ukraine. So it's an enormous platform where he will try to make an imprint on world leaders. And then going to The View is one of those opportunities, proximity, being there in New York, sitting with the ladies of that panel show. He's been there a number of times before, and it might be a chance to hear the president reflect not in a typical news environment or a speech environment, but to have more of a conversation and to perhaps reach a different audience. And embedded in that will be his effort to try to help Kamala Harris. He is certainly trying to campaign for her. This isn't billed as a campaign event, but certainly he'll want to make some of those messages known as well, right?
Okay, Kelly O'Donnell at the White House, thank you for that. Now let's find out what voters are thinking. They're the ones that are ultimately going to decide all of this. Shaq, you're in a key swing county, in a key swing state. Tell us why Door County is so important.
Well, Ryan, this is one of those true bellwether counties. It has sided with the winner of the presidential election in every election going back to 1996. When you look at the demographics, you have a higher percentage of older voters, a large white working class group of voters here as well. And it's an area where you have votes very tight margins fairly routinely. I don't know if you can also tell behind me, it's also just a pretty beautiful area to be. Some people call it the Cape Cod of the Midwest. So we wanted to make sure we came here to talk to voters, these swing voters, to see how they felt.
And we've talked a lot about the apparent momentum.
I didn't hear what she'll bring to the country, but I just heard she's a candidate.
I'm surprised at how strong she is. I honestly kind of didn't know she was there for a few years because I didn't feel like she did a whole lot.
I was very negative about it. I just think she was like a nobody, didn't even know who she was. And she's done a reasonably good job of marketing.
I definitely have come to the conclusion that she's capable. I mean, and she's proved that in the debate, and she's proved that since then. So.
Would you have said that in July?
No.
Yeah, that's why we're struggling.
And you know, Ryan, those conversations that you just heard, they reflect a sentiment that we saw in the new NBC News poll, that historic rise in favorability for Vice President Harris. That's something that I've heard from voters here as well. Even those who say that they're not ultimately going to vote for her, don't side with her, don't love her policies or the Democratic Party, they say that they view her, many of them, fundamentally differently than they did back in July, Ryan.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable that the interview you just played was pretty revealing about kind of the thought process that some of these voters are going through. Was it your sense that they became more familiar with her and more comfortable with her just because she got to the top of the ticket, or was it her debate performance? Was it a combination of both? Talk me through the thought process of some of these voters.
It's a combination of both, and it really depends on which voter you're talking to. For many of them who said that they didn't have a positive opinion or view of her in the past, they pointed directly to that debate performance. They liked what they saw from her. They got to hear from her for the very first time. For others who said that they were already planning to vote for President Biden, they're traditionally Democratic voters, what it did was tick up the enthusiasm that they had for this ticket. You know, the Harris campaign actually reached out to us earlier today. They saw we were here doing this reporting, and they said that in this county alone, they've had more than 300 new volunteer signups since Harris moved to the top of the ticket. And that just shows you it's not just about winning people over, but it's about building that enthusiasm. While that number doesn't sound like an astronomical amount, it represents about 1% of the population in this county. When you have those tight margins, as you see in Door County regularly, as you see in the state, in Wisconsin regularly, that can ultimately make a difference.
Yeah, in a race that is so tight, in a race that we thought was already baked, everybody had already made up their mind. It is very interesting to hear voters talk to you in real time about how they're changing their minds. Shaq Brewster, thanks for being out there, man. We appreciate it as always. Coming up, a key Republican weighs in, likely dooming Trump's latest effort to change the election laws in Nebraska to tip a close election in his favor. Plus, multiple global conflicts escalating and looming over world leaders as they gather this week at the United Nations, with President Biden set to deliver a major speech tomorrow. You're watching Meet the Press Now. And welcome back. With the polls continuing to show a very tight race between Vice President Harris and former President Trump, some Republicans are making another push to change the way Nebraska allocates its electoral votes. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham with Kristen yesterday advocating for a winner-take-all system in Nebraska.
I think Nebraska has been talking about this for years. It is a very close election. To my friends in Nebraska, that one electoral vote could be the difference between Harris being president or not, and she's a disaster for Nebraska and the world.
Now, that change would take away Harris's chance of winning just one electoral vote from Nebraska's 2nd district, which voted for President Biden in 2020. However, Republicans lacked the necessary support in the state legislature when the issue came up several months ago. And one of the Republican holdouts has reiterated his opposition to changing the law earlier today. Joining me now is Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon, who happens to represent that Omaha area congressional district at the center of this push by his party. Congressman Bacon, thank you so much for being here. And I want to ask you now, State Senator McDonnell has reiterated his stance against changing the rules today. I know that you have come out in support of changing those rules. You understand Nebraska politics as well as anyone. What are the odds that this rule is going to change by Election Day?
Very unlikely. I know Senator McDonnell, we're friends, but he's not by himself. There's two other Republicans that are no right now, which means we're 3 votes short, maybe 2 votes short. And so this will likely have to wait till after the election, and we can debate about it in the future legislature. And Senator McDonnell, he represents his district, and he campaigned on it. And so I understand where he's coming from. I just want you to know, from our vantage point, standing where I sit, I wish every state did what we did. If every state did what we did and went by district, it would be a much more democratic process. You would get the candidates out to more states than just the 4 or 5 states. The problem is when you're only one of 2 states, it brings in a lot of outside money. It favors one side over the other clearly, and so it causes distortions when you're one of 2 states not doing winner take all.
But can you understand the concerns about changing the law so close to Election Day?
Yes, I do, and I think it would have been better off if this could have been handled in the spring. I believe, though, when it's all said and done, it's going to be in the future legislature to tackle this. This came up also in 2016, and the Republicans were 1 vote shy. And I got to point out, we didn't always have it this way. In the early 1990s and before, we were winner take all. And it was a Democrat governor and it was a Democrat state senator in the unicameral who pushed changing to what we have now. And so a lot of people don't realize that prior to the early 90s, we also were winner take all.
I mean, you've won in this district pretty consistently, even though it may vote for Democrats at the presidential level. Can't you just convince your Republican friends to help President Trump and win that district as opposed to trying to change the rules right before Election Day?
Well, there's definitely pros and cons to this, and there's good points on this. And as I already mentioned, if every state did what we did, our country, I think, would be in a better spot. Now, I readily acknowledge that. Now, when it comes to this election, President Trump called me last week, and I'll talk to his team. If he could focus on what he did as president, like prior to COVID, the economy grew faster than inflation. Wages were growing faster than inflation. We had a secure border. We had energy independence. We didn't have all these Russian invasions, Hamas stuff going on. And you could point to a lot of positions that Vice President Harris had in 2020 that are way outside the mainstream. If we had a disciplined campaign and focus on those issues, I think he would do very well in our district. But I think we get or at least his campaign has gotten sidetracked on issues that take him not on the core issues that will make a difference. My job as a candidate is to focus on the core issues that make a difference in our district, and that's how we've been able to win in a 50-50 district. And so it's an RPI of 0. It's not an R2 or a D2. It's evenly split down the middle. And so you got to really work hard in this district to win.
And this is my last question on this, because I know that we have other stuff that we need to talk about. But I wanted to put up some of your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal from earlier this month. And you said, we live in the greatest country in the world. To maintain our greatness, we need more focus on consensus building and less on hating our fellow Americans. We need a country over party agenda. We need the moral courage to do what's right. We need more statesmen and fewer partisans. I want to go back to what you told me at the beginning of this interview, that you were hoping Republicans signed on to it because it wouldn't, or Senator Graham, I should say, said that one of the reasons he was trying to convince your fellow Republicans was just because it would hurt Kamala Harris's campaign. Doesn't that run contrary to what you're suggesting in this op-ed of trying to fight through the partisanship when it comes to issues like these?
You know, people have different reasons for the winner-take-all or opposing it. I would just tell you my key point is one side of the aisle is getting $7 million added into the Omaha area, and the other side is getting 0. And so it really creates a distortion. If you're from one party, you love it because you have a huge cash cow of money coming in, and the other party has very little of that coming in. So it probably affects 3 to 5 races down ballot on our side. That's just being honest there. Again, I think the statesman thing would be to say, we should all do what Nebraska is doing, because I think it's a better way to go. But it's a hard thing to get that to happen. The Constitution gives us to the states to decide, And so Nebraska in 1992, I believe it was, don't quote me on the exact date, it was in the early 90s, decided to go from winner take all to go by district. And being one of those two states, it has some consequences. And we feel it on our side of the aisle. So I'm just being candid with you there. You know what triggered me to write that editorial? I went to a state party meeting. I said, hey, I'm not a Republican first. I'm a Christian first. I'm an American, then I'm a Republican. And I was taken back at some of the anger out there. Well, we want you to be Republican first. And I said, that's this culture that we're in today of you got to win at all cost, and that's more important than being right or doing the right thing. I think that hurts our country, and I see that around. It's more important to win than to do the right thing, and that's not good for the country.
Okay, let's move on and talk about other topics. I appreciate you answering all the questions on that. I specifically want to talk about your trip to Ukraine. You recently met with President Zelensky. You talked about how he wants clearances to use weapons to strike inside Russia. He's going to meet with President Biden this week. How would you recommend Zelensky make his pitch?
I would say, Mr. President, the Russians are bombing our cities. When I arrived, by the way, in Kyiv on a Saturday morning at 1:30 in the morning, Kyiv was being attacked by Russia. When I was in Kharkiv, the Russians bombed an apartment building and created 35 casualties. So if I was President Zelensky, I would say, President Biden, the Russians are bombing our cities every single day, and you're not allowing us to attack the bombers when they're on the ground. This lengthens the war. It creates more Russian or Ukrainian casualties. It's creating gridlock. And in the end, it's playing into the hands of President Putin, who is doing this invasion. I think that's how I would look at President Biden and try to convince him to change his mind.
That's not the view of some of your fellow Republicans who feel that if Ukraine begins a bombing campaign inside of Russia, that could extend the war and increase the hostilities. What do you say to your fellow Republicans who oppose this change in policy?
You know, I'm a Ronald Reagan guy, was since I was 13 years old. I love Eisenhower. Unilateral disarmament or unilateral tying your own hands does not work when you're dealing with a barbaric dictator that created this invasion, which is Putin. I have moral clarity on what's going on here. Putin is invading Ukraine, wanting to take him over. He wants to eliminate Ukraine as a country and just make it all Russia, get rid of the Ukrainian language and so forth. You don't defeat Putin by allowing him to do attacks that are not responded to, or you don't respond back in kind and go after the bombers and the areas of Russia that are attacking Ukraine's cities. I think that just emboldens him. Now, he's going to use this blackmail and bullying and intimidation. I don't think it works. Who should fear more? I'd rather Putin fearing us instead of us fearing him. And I think our president, in particular our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, are being too tentative, and they're doing too much hand-wringing, and it's hurting us. It's hurting Ukraine win this fight.
And before we go quickly, we're going to avoid a government shutdown this week. Can you promise us that?
I give it a 98% surety that we will not have a shutdown. There's always that 2%, but I know the speaker's heart. The speaker knows that a shutdown is bad politics and it's bad governance, and to do it right before an election is just plain stupid.
Okay, Congressman Don Bacon, you always come with the straight answers. We appreciate that, sir. Thank you for being here. Up next, new revelations into the second assassination attempt of former President Trump and the chilling note released by authorities today, allegedly written by the suspect. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The man charged in connection with the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump will remain in custody. A judge denied bail today for Ryan Ruth. It comes as we're learning more about his actions in the weeks leading up to last weekend's incident at Donald Trump's Florida golf club. NBC News shot this video from along the property. When it zooms in, you can see a gap in the bushes that line the fence near the course's sixth hole green. We believe that's roughly where authorities spotted Ruth last Sunday. Now, according to a court filing, the suspect spent a month scoping out locations where Mr. Trump could be, including that golf course. The filing also says that a civilian alerted authorities last Wednesday, 3 days after the incident, to a box Ruth had allegedly dropped off at his home several months earlier. Prosecutors say that witness opened the box after learning about last weekend's incident. The witness stated the box contained ammunition, a metal pipe, miscellaneous building materials, tools, 4 phones, and various letters. The court filing included a picture of a handwritten letter addressed to the world that stated, quote, "This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I failed you." The filing also included this photo of the rifle that authorities say they recovered from the golf club along a chain-link fence, and this photo that shows the obliterated serial number on the rifle. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins me now. A lot to unpack here. Have they still been able to actually figure out his motive? Have they gotten enough from this to figure out where he was headed?
I mean, they're still gathering information, but it's pretty clear from the public evidence that he was extremely dissatisfied and disappointed with Donald Trump. He was really pro-Ukraine and actually tried to go fight in the Ukraine war. So there were a lot of reasons that he didn't like Trump. And it was very clear from this evidence that he was plotting to assassinate Donald Trump. And they answered the question about how he ended up at the golf course that day. Did he get tipped off? Did he get lucky? No, he was going there a lot, staking out Mr. Trump and also going to Mar-a-Lago, according to his cell phone records. That's pretty alarming.
And is there the chance that they could bring additional charges in this case?
Yes. In fact, they said in court, prosecutors did, that they plan to file charges under a statute making it a crime to attempt to assassinate a federal official or former official that carries a life term in prison.
How soon could we see those?
Any day now, really.
And based on what we know now, do investigators feel that they could have thwarted this assassination attempt? What could they have done to prevent this from happening?
Remember, the Secret Service director was asked that, and he sort of said no. He said the system essentially worked. He said we couldn't possibly secure that entire golf course. We had a bubble essentially around Mr. Trump, and the agents at the lead portion of that bubble saw the gun. But it does raise a question, what if they didn't see the gun? It was one sharp-eyed young agent, Secret Service agent, who saw that gun. If they had not, it could have been a much different situation.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what the FBI did today. They released their data on violent crimes across the United States in 2023. Maybe these numbers might surprise some of our viewers. What do they tell us?
It shows that violent crime is down, and this is a multi-year trend. Violent crime overall down by 3%, but murder down by 11.6%. That's the largest drop ever recorded. Now, this is coming after a huge spike in violent crime during the pandemic. Murder went up a lot in 2020. But, you know, this has become a political football because Donald Trump is out there saying crime is rising. The stats just don't support that. I mean, crime stats are complicated. You can cherry pick, you can do a lot of things, but this is the FBI data. It comes from cities. Every major city is included this year, 94% of the population covered, and it clearly found for the second year in a row that violent crime is trending down. And there's other data that show that it's still going down in the first 6 months of 2024.
Okay, Ken Delaney, thank you for that update. We appreciate it.
You bet.
After the break, a wave of deadly attacks and counterattacks in northern Israel and southern Lebanon as the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah escalates yet again. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Fighting between Israel and Lebanon escalated significantly today. The Lebanese Ministry of Health says that almost 500 people were killed in airstrikes just today, which would make it the deadliest day of Israeli strikes in Lebanon since the 2006 war. Israel's military says it struck approximately 1,300 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon over the last 24 hours. During a meeting with his top military brass, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, issued this warning, saying, quote, "Whoever tries to hurt us, we hurt him even more." Seemingly undeterred, Hezbollah launched strikes of its own. The IDF says at least 165 projectiles crossed into Israel from southern Lebanon. Israel has now declared a special state of emergency for the next 48 hours in anticipation of expanded Hezbollah rocket fire. NBC's Matt Bradley joins me now from Beirut. Matt, what have you been hearing and seeing in Beirut? How does this latest escalation between Israel and Hezbollah compare to some of the previous cross-border attacks we've seen since October 7th?
Well, I mean, when we're talking about since October 7th, I think that, you were talking about how this is the most deaths we've seen in a single day since 2006. I wouldn't be surprised if it's exceeded even single-day death tolls from the 2006 war. That was a month-long war that killed nearly 2,000 Lebanese, mostly civilians, in a month-long period. And now we're talking about nearly 500. And that death toll, by the way, it includes 35 children and 58 women, and the injury total has now well exceeded more than 1,500. We were just at a hospital here in Beirut where we heard that there actually weren't that many people who have been hospitalized here from those strikes in Beirut. And that's because, as I think you've seen on your screen, there are just thousands of people who are fleeing from southern Lebanon towards Beirut and into northern areas of Lebanon. They're fleeing what is, as you described, one of the worst confrontations between the Israelis and Hezbollah for decades now. And there's also been these warnings, of course, from the Israelis. This is a very serious situation, and so many Lebanese, after more than a year, nearly a year of fighting over this border, are now very much taking this seriously because the death toll and the scope and the scale and the tempo of the bombardments by the Israelis have picked up so dramatically in just the past couple of days. So we're hearing also that the Lebanese are canceling schools in southern Lebanon. They're saying for the next at least 2 days, and in the Bekaa Valley and in areas in southern Beirut. So this is a crisis that is affecting the entire nation.
Yeah, and we were showing video there of people evacuating. I would imagine that people that live in this region are accustomed to the skirmishes that go back and forth between Israel and Lebanon. Maybe expand on this a little bit. Does it seem different this time around? They feel that they cannot take the risk of staying where they are, especially if they're in the southern part of Lebanon?
It's a great question, Ryan, because we have to remember that this fighting has been going on at a much, much lower level for the past year, ever since the day after October 7th, when Hezbollah struck areas in northern Israel that they say are part of Lebanese and Syrian territory. We've been seeing cross-border fighting, but it has been largely contained, and the fear since then has always been that this could break out into a full war, and even a region-wide war that could wrap in Iran and the United States, which has naval assets that have been parked off the coast of Lebanon and in the Gulf area. Now we're seeing all of those fears coming to fruition. And we're still wondering whether or not this is going to involve some sort of Israeli ground invasion. And that is the real fear, because that could just increase the level of casualties by orders of magnitude. This is not the situation like we're seeing in Gaza, where people literally had no place to go. Here, at least they can flee. But everybody who you talk to here, when they speak about what is to come, their minds and their words always go back to 2006, that month-long war that, as I've just mentioned, killed more than 1,000, well more than 1,000, mostly Lebanese civilians. That is the risk that we could see here. There's something in Israeli politics, in Israeli military terminology, called the Dahiyah Doctrine. And the notion behind that is that the Israelis will punish not just Hezbollah, but also the entire Israeli population for their tolerance of Hezbollah as a major, not just militant, but political force. They have, ministries, they have seats in parliament. The Dahiyah Doctrine, which is named after that neighborhood in southern Beirut that has been struck twice in the past week and killed several high-level Hezbollah officials. This is still on the books, and this is something that a lot of Lebanese fear could once again mean that Israel will essentially exact collective punishment against all of Lebanon. And that's why you're seeing this incredible level of fear among civilians who are fleeing from the southern part of the country.
Okay, Matt Bradley, live for us from Beirut. Matt, stay safe. Thank you for your reporting. And as we mentioned, President Biden and world leaders are gathering in New York over the next several days for the annual gathering of the UN General Assembly. And among the top issues expected to be discussed are these multiple ongoing wars around the world and the search for a diplomatic resolution to them. My NBC News colleague Richard Lui sat down with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair on the sidelines of the Milk in Asia summit to discuss how world leaders should grapple with these challenges.
It's the most since World War II. 56 ongoing conflicts or wars globally, involving nearly half the world's countries. This will dominate the United Nations General Assembly this week. The Middle East front and center.
Underlying all the issues in the Middle East is this question of whether the Middle East can release itself from a politics where the politicization of religion dominates.
Tony Blair, former British Prime Minister and former special envoy to the Middle East, was there just last week.
This war in Gaza has been, of course, the worst, the most dramatic, because it arose out of the terrible attack on the 7th of October. But, there were 3 wars before that. On each occasion, we've tried to just return to a status quo that we hoped might hold, and it hasn't.
One important sign of progress leaders now tell him:
if you look at the UAE or Saudi Arabia, you have leadership there that is deliberately trying to take their countries out of the idea that you take a religion, turn it into a political ideology, and back to the idea that Islam is a religion, it's between you and your God, and there's no reason why you can't get on with people of different religions.
A lesson Blair learned from one of his diplomatic hallmarks.
I learned a lot through the process of peace in Northern Ireland because we were fortunate there, that we managed to bring two communities that were, at war with each other to peace. And I still believe that it's possible to do that in the Middle East.
Then there's the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin not at the UN this week, not facing Ukraine's president, and not facing critics. Blair reveals a personal conversation that helps to explain.
But I actually remember having a conversation with Putin about Ukraine when I was still in office, saying, look, we've got no strategic interest in pulling Ukraine towards us, just to reassure you. If Ukraine wants to go with you guys, that's fine. And his view was very, very clear. I mean, I'll never forget the conversation. He said, no, they're coming with us. I said, yeah, obviously, if they choose to come with you, that's fine. And no, not if they choose. And I'm afraid that's where the problem is.
It's these high-level conflict negotiations that help fuel Blair's new how-to book for leaders, like the 133 speaking at the General Assembly.
If you take a position of power, your job is to change things for the better. I don't understand what the point of being in power is if you're not going to try.
So you had some aha moments about what you actually got done and how you got it done.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the slightly shocking things about leaving office is how much you learn after you leave and how much of that you wish you'd known when you were there.
Richard Lui, NBC News, Singapore.
Still to come, swing states, scandals, and the changing state of the race. The panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As we reported earlier, Kamala Harris has a narrow lead over Donald Trump in our new NBC News national poll. It is, of course, within the margin of error. And that lead coincides with a major shift in how voters see her. Back in July, when President Biden was still at the top of the ticket, half the voters we polled actually had a negative opinion of Harris. But look at this. Now that the vice president is the Democratic Party's official nominee, nearly half of respondents have a positive opinion of her. Let's bring in our panel. Shelby Talcott is a reporter at Semaphore, Faiz Shakir, advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders, and Sarah Chamberlain is the president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. You know, Shelby, I feel like we've spent so much of this campaign talking about how voters didn't like either candidate. Now we have a poll that shows that at least half the country actually likes Kamala Harris. That's got to really be a changing dynamic in this race.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think it kind of speaks to who is winning the sort of war over defining Kamala Harris, right? We've seen Donald Trump and his campaign really try to define her as super liberal, as somebody who is further to the left of Joe Biden. But it hasn't really worked, clearly, because Kamala Harris's campaign has come out and said that, you know, they've changed some of their positions. They've sort of, restricted a little bit her media appearances, but it's working. They are defining her in a way that Donald Trump's campaign is struggling to.
And maybe one of the ways, Faz, that they're being helped by this definition is the amount of money they're spending. I want to show you these numbers. Spending at the end of August, the Harris campaign outspent the Trump campaign nearly 3-to-1. That is a lot more money. It means a lot more ads focused on working on Harris's image. How much does that help in defining her favorability with the average voter?
Well, it was not only the money, which they have, I think, $250 million plus cash on hand, which is a crazy amount. It's that they've done some great tactics, Ryan, at the convention, how they introduced her at that. So she obviously did a great job at the debate. So she's nailed the tactics of those major high-profile moments. Now, as you head into the last stages, that 50% approval plus is doing a lot of work for you to help try to reach these late deciders, but they are not there fully. And that's the thing to continue to focus on. They are not decided. And while they might have positive opinions of her, they are not sold on the economy right now. And I hope that they'll be thinking about creative, new, and interesting ways to do events. If you saw Trump's event today, he was like in this round table with the farmers and other people. They're mixing up the event. It wasn't a rally style. They're trying to engage in a real economic conversation. We haven't seen it from the Harris campaign. Would love to see more of it down the home stretch.
And have Republicans lost an opportunity here to define Kamala Harris? Was their message too scattershot? What did they do wrong that is helping her with these numbers?
The message was way too scattershot to start with, but hopefully we're bringing that in. we're kind of closing. I think what President Trump did today was a great example of how they're trying to change the messaging and kind of bring it back home, hopefully get off the cats and dogs in Ohio, right, and bring it back to what people care about, which is the economy. I mean, I travel the country and people are talking about the economy and immigration.
And probably a state where they care the most about the economy is Pennsylvania. I admit, I let myself do one of those maps where you click the state to figure out red and blue and start counting up to 270. I said I wasn't going to do it until October. I did it anyway. Shelby, it just seems to keep coming back to Pennsylvania. How important is Pennsylvania ultimately going to be at the end of this?
I mean, Pennsylvania is hugely important. You just look at how the candidates, where they're going, and they're both going to Pennsylvania a lot. It matters a ton. I was just with J.D. Vance over the weekend. He was in Pennsylvania. So it's not just Donald Trump and Kamala Harris that are hitting up this state. It is their surrogates. It is their vice presidential picks. They understand, both of the campaigns understand, that it very well could come down to Pennsylvania. And as we've seen in the polls, Pennsylvania is extremely tight. It's within the margin of error. We have some polls where Donald Trump is up a little bit, some polls where Kamala Harris is up a little bit. They're recognizing, when I talk to both campaigns, that this could make or break whether they win.
And in the vein of Pennsylvania, Faz, I want you to expand about what you were talking before about this economic message that my sense is that you feel that the Harris campaign's falling a bit short on. How do they make that connection with those working class voters who maybe their ideals are closer aligned with the conservative side of the ledger, but perhaps their pocketbook needs might fit better with Democrats?
My humble advice to them, because they're doing a great job, honestly, I feel that way, is that when she talks about the economy, she doesn't talk about it like she talks about abortion. When you hear her talk about abortion, Ryan, there's a passion and emotion that comes out, and the first thing she does is she says, let me tell you about people who are struggling making this decision. She puts herself in the shoes of the other and tells you about people who are struggling. Talks about the economy. What's the first thing she says? I lived a middle-class lifestyle. I worked at McDonald's. She's telling you about herself. I want to tell you about me. And I would humbly suggest that at this point, what you want to tell people is, I know you. I understand you. That's why the abortion messaging works. She understands them. On the economy, how much do you also understand that John Deere is shutting down factories, that we've got Master Lock moving factories to Mexico? How are we going to help the workers here? How are the UAW workers standing up against Stellantis? How are you going to work with? People want to hear a real economic conversation that understands what they're going through.
Can Donald Trump do that?
He can do that, and he has done that. And that's why it's still close on the economy. I mean, Donald Trump reaches the everyday worker. Maybe he does it in his own style that maybe we agree or disagree with, but he does a much better job of it than the vice president's doing. And I agree with you. She's talking about herself instead of what the needs of the people in that state.
And I think that's reflected in the polls, too, because consistently, regardless of what the national polling or the state-by-state polling is, Donald Trump is still ahead of Kamala Harris in terms of things like the economy. So his campaign always sees the economy as something that they really want to harp on and hone in on because they see it as a winning issue.
So we talked about Pennsylvania as one of the big battlegrounds. Another one that is emerging is North Carolina. Obviously, Republicans are dealing with some trouble in North Carolina with their gubernatorial candidate, Mark Robinson. I want to play for you a little bit of how J.D. Vance is reacting to this Mark Robinson scandal. Take a listen.
Do you believe him that those were not his posts?
I don't not believe him. I don't believe him. I just think that you have to let these things sometimes play out in the court of public opinion. He's going to make whatever arguments he wants to make. I'm sure the news media and others are going to investigate these comments further. I just think that fundamentally it's Mark Robinson and the people of North Carolina that get to decide whether he's their governor, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Sarah, does this matter? Does the fact that they have such a weak gubernatorial candidate impact Donald Trump in a state that could be as pivotal as North Carolina?
Actually, I think it really does. So my entire family happens to live in North Carolina. And the gubernatorial candidate was never ahead to start with. He was down in the 30s. But I think for the first time, you could see him pull the top of the ticket down. People don't want to turn out to vote. They may stay home. The Democrats are energized in the state. They are definitely going to turn out. I don't know about the Republicans. And this man is truly a disaster for North Carolina.
Would it help Trump, Faz, if he rescinded his endorsement, or should he stay as far away from it as possible?
Yeah, I'm sure that's that's right. Good luck to him. That's the reason why we have a Democratic governor of North Carolina. And I think we could win this state, and I think only helping us. And you're right that at this point, the challenge for the Democrats is to not make it fully about Mark Robinson, because they're going to dig their own hole with that and now continue on a message that doesn't brings in those voters who are kind of, I wanted to be Mark Robinson, but I can't. Well, now you got to be with us.
Yeah, and Shelby, is it Do they need a better answer than what we saw from J.D. Vance, a way to explain or distance themselves from his campaign at this point?
Well, Kamala Harris's campaign is trying to tie Mark Robinson directly to Donald Trump. So I do think so. This was a very sort of lawyerly non-answer. And Donald Trump's campaign is viewing it in this aspect. They argue that, sure, we endorsed him, we've campaigned with him, but it's a separate race, and now we have to sort of focus on our own thing, and making this into a bigger deal and continuing to sort of proactively harp on it will only further the media stories, and so we'll just sort of fly under the radar and try to get through it.
And Donald Trump has shown a capacity to be kind of his own candidate, separate from anyone else, right?
He has, but I would tell you, as I said, my whole family's down there. They are getting inundated with Harris tweets and phone calls and TV commercials talking about tying Trump to and quoting he's greater than King, Martin Luther King Jr., which is a disaster. This is why people need to vote in primaries. We wouldn't be in this situation.
I have a lot of family in North Carolina as well. I echo that. Shelby, Faz, Sarah, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, but the news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.